Welcome. Before we begin, let me briefly introduce who we are. TCN is a global leader in cloud-based contact center technology, purpose-built as a fully native in-house platform for compliance, scalability, and speed. Trusted by contact centers, BPOs, accounts receivables management firms, healthcare providers, and enterprise teams worldwide, TCN delivers a comprehensive suite of tools, including omni-channel communication, automation, predictive dialers, IVR, click-to-pay, workforce management, real-time analytics, and compliance solutions to boost efficiency and elevate customer experience. With immediate access to the TCN operator platform and a reputation for exceptional support, TCN empowers organizations to scale seamlessly and stay ahead in an evolving regulatory and digital landscape. I'm also honored to be co-hosting this session with a trusted partner and respected voice in the region. Great Outcomes is a leading IT and communication solutions provider supporting enterprise and mid-market organizations across New Zealand and Australia. Their reputation is built on delivering secure, reliable, and innovative communication systems grounded in experience, confidentiality, and trust. At the helm of Great Outcomes is my co-host today, Giles Potter, founder and director, who specializes in contact center transformation and digital customer experience. While Giles is known for helping organizations apply AI and advanced technologies to lift compliance, productivity, and customer outcomes with a sharp focus on practical, ethical innovation. Together, we'll be guiding you through today's session, exploring how AI tools are transforming the way contact centers manage compliance across voice, SMS, chat, and email. But first, let's take a moment to ground ourselves in what's at stake. In our discovery, contact centers across the region are facing a few major compliance pain points: unsecure data flows across channels, consent mismanagement, PCI DSS exposure, lack of real-time rule enforcement, inadequate audit readiness. Now, meanwhile, regulators like ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, OAIC, the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner in New Zealand, and the Financial Markets Authority, FMA, are setting clear expectations. Proactive compliance is no longer optional, it's operational. Now, today, we'll unpack these challenges with a panel of experts across legal, ethical, and technology domains. We'll also showcase a live 10-minute demo of TCN's natural language compliance, showing how real-time rule enforcement can work in practice. And finally, we'll close by addressing your questions and share practical takeaways you can implement straight away. So with that, Giles, over to you. Introduce our panel and kick off our first segment, data security in voice and text channels.
Lee, thanks very much. And good afternoon to everyone in New Zealand and good morning still to those in the East Coast in Australia. It's great to be here and really excited to be a part of this webinar from Great Outcomes and TCN and to introduce the fantastic panel that we've got here joining us today. So first off, I'd like to introduce to you Jacob Maiore. Jacob is the board chair of Australian Collectors and Debt Buyers Association, and he actually holds multiple roles. He's here today as our current board chair at ACDBA, that's the Australian Collectors and Debt Buyers Association, and contributes to various committees of the association, including the National Hardship Register Assessment Committee. Jacob is also the CEO and owner of Access Recoveries and Collections, a business that's redefining debt recovery solutions in Brisbane. Thanks, Jacob. Great to have you here and on our panel today. Our next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Julika Waldman-Smith. partner from Hesketh Henry in Auckland. Julika has been with Hesketh Henry for several years. She has extensive experience advising clients on mergers and acquisitions, regulatory compliance, data protection, and intellectual property. Julika works closely with clients, providing practical advice that aligns with their strategic goals, managing risk, and ensuring regulatory compliance. Welcome, Julika. And just before I introduce our last panelist, just forgot to say Jacob has joined us from Brisbane. So thanks. We're well covered across many cities across Australia and New Zealand today. And also the USA, our last panelist that I would like to introduce, coming to us from Washington, Utah. So thanks, John. At the end of his day, John McDonald is a senior sales engineer with TCN with extensive experience in cloud contact center software. John's known for guiding clients through seamless implementations and driving long-term success with scalable solutions. So thanks, John, for joining us. And we now have our full panel here for today's session. So with that, why don't we kick right into it and get started today? Today you'll be hearing obviously from all of the panel. It's a very interactive session. We will be starting by looking at our first topic today on data security. Just a little reminder to our guests out there, look for the Q&A button on your screen, should be at the bottom in the panel for you. Please do use that. Please send in your questions. We're really looking forward to receiving those, and throughout the day, I will try to pick up and answer all the questions that we can. So don't hesitate to also address them to any of the panelists that you might like to hear further from on any of the topics that we're covering. So to get started, we'll be looking at data security in voice and digital channels, because today contact centers handle a massive volume of customer information, all very sensitive, of course, all very private to the customer and between them and the organization. So ensuring that both our voice calls and our text communications are protected from, say, any interception or unauthorized access, even the improper storage or access to that storage. Why don't we get started? I'd like to ask Julika. Maybe, Julika, would you like to kick us off and tell us from your point of view, a legal perspective, what would you see as being, say, the most underestimated data security risk that contact centers have today?
Sure. Thanks, Giles, and thanks for the introduction. Look, it's a really interesting question, right? And quite a broad and open one. And I'm coming to it from a New Zealand legal perspective. And I think what I've seen in contact centers and sort of across the board, especially when we're seeing such a growth in new technology, including the use of AI, is sometimes the most underestimated risk includes people not being fully aware of how a tool works or what the terms of that tools are. So how that personal information is actually getting handled by the tool, where is it going, what's the use? Often people get very excited by the functionality, which I can completely understand, and in that might forget to have a look at actually the back end and really importantly, look at those terms. In New Zealand, we don't yet have specific laws that deal only with AI. Instead, it's more of an approach of our existing laws applying to AI tools. We are, however, seeing a bit of guidance from regulators, including our Privacy Commissioner, who has given some guidance in relation to the use of AI. And it's really encouraging people that when they start using these tools, to make sure they're reviewing the terms associated with their tools and making sure they're appropriate to use and proportionate to any privacy risk there might be. Also conducting a privacy assessment at the time the actual tool is starting to be used. So right at the outset is always the best time to conduct these things, and is in fact what the Privacy Commissioner is suggesting. Also being really transparent about the use of these tools. It's often, they're obviously very new and technologies are developing very quickly, but ensuring that everyone is fully aware of what's happening is a really important part of the journey. And of course, ensuring that, the tools, terms and conditions and exactly what they do comply with your own legal requirements as well, ensuring you can continue compliance with the Privacy Act. And I suppose just one other point I want to touch on briefly is, which I'm sure a lot of the viewers will be aware, New Zealand does have a mandatory privacy breach requirement in the Privacy Act. So where there is a notifiable privacy breach, that there's reporting requirements. And so it's really important, since you have that requirement, to ensure that you're aware of, what privacy data breach risks there are, and being able to react quickly. So making sure you can make that assessment quickly to see if the breach is notifiable or not. So that's another really important sort of legal aspects that's sometimes overlooked.
Yeah, great, Julika. Thanks very much. And right at the beginning there, you mentioned that, of course, AI regulations or regulations that address AI today are changing fast. And so we've got to really keep right up to date, don't we, to see how there might be some new areas coming in that managers and business leaders should be actually taking into account or
And another
responding to.
key item as well with that is the inadequate encryption and unsecured integration between the systems. So I think that's where transparency comes in as well, in terms of systems and also with your agents.
That's great, Lee. And actually, just Lee, whilst we're with you, could you just tell us a little bit about maybe when you're talking about encryption, a lot of people use their own devices these days, don't they? We've got frontline customer agents actually using something, maybe working from home. Is there anything you could say about that for us?
I am not a supporter of, in a business environment, of using private or personal devices or bring your own device type of a ordeal. The best approach is a centralized cloud platform with a built-in access to controls. You have then single sign-on requirements and endpoint restrictions, and just ensuring all of your traffic is encrypted and logged regardless of agent location. So essentially, what that means is you'll have a zero trust environment where security travels with the user, not the device, and just enabling remote and hybrid teams to operate safely and without compromising compliance or customer data. So that's what I would say. I would just get rid of it.
Yeah, look, thanks, Lee. And of course, terms like zero trust has often been one of those jargon terms that sometimes, almost like makes your eyes glaze over. But, these are important issues. And thanks for raising that, because it actually helps us start to understand what some of those, what I thought previously were IT jargon issues, but actually they're really important for us to get to know and understand, aren't they? So with that, why don't we move on to our second topic today, looking at the consent that our customers or whatever, you may not have customers, you might have, say, patients if you're in the health sector, or participants in a research sector, whatever you call them, but the consent and how you comply with that from your customers. And I want to bring in Jacob here for this important topic. Jacob, could you start us off with, like, where do you see contact centers are most often slipping up on gaining consent? Is it the opt-ins or disclosures? Or how would you respond?
Yeah, thanks, Giles, and thanks for the introduction. Look, contact centers slip up in many different ways. I think it's difficult to put my finger on one particular one, but the biggest one that I see is a lot of contact centers treating consent as a box-ticking exercise and not making sure that their scripts, their privacy notices, and all of those sorts of things aren't just legalese, unapproachable documents. They need to be understandable. The consumer or customer needs to understand what it is that they're consenting to. And likewise, your staff need to have a good, solid understanding of what it is that they're asking the consumer or customer to consent to, so that if there are follow-up questions, that consent is obtained correctly. I also notice a lot of contact centers that set their policies and procedures around these things and then never review them again. I think it's very important that we're always re-reviewing these policies and procedures, listening to and responding to how customers are understanding the questions they're asking and the complaints that are being received that may then show issues in the underlying processes. And look, lastly for me is I notice a lot of over collection of of personal information. I think the biggest one to highlight there is sensitive information. But I think that we could draw it across all of personal information where there is a lot of the time extra information being collected without the customer's express consent, without a full understanding of why we need this information to achieve the purposes or goals we're after.
Yeah, and in Australia, you've got a body or an authority, I should say, that is taking a leading role in this, the Australian Communications and Media Authority.
Yeah.
Are you able to talk a little about what you understand the ACMA expects around explicit opt-in, opt-out consents?
Look, I think that it goes broader than just the ACMA. I think that there's a large push when it comes to any kind of consumer consent nowadays that it isn't written in legalese, it's approachable to the consumer or the customer, and they fully understand and are having actual consent, not just saying, yes, I agree because there's a tick box on the screen or because that big long script got read out.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jacob. Just sticking with that topic around the Communications and Media Authority and thinking about it from a New Zealand perspective, because I don't think there's an exact equivalent body. But just bringing Julika back in here. Julika, I wonder if you could talk to how leaders should interpret the Privacy Act, given that that's legal regulation. It's not a body or an authority. And is there anything sort of similar in New Zealand that might be able to compare against that ACMA?
Yeah, like I think you're sort of covering a few different points here. So in the Privacy Act, we've got sort of a data minimization principle, which a little bit goes to what Jacob was talking about from the Australian perspective, where really all you're allowed to collect when you're collecting personal information is the information necessary for your lawful purpose. So you need to have a really clear purpose for what you're collecting information for, and then making sure that the personal information you're collecting relates to that purpose. So really, you're effectively required to not over collect, right? That's in the Privacy Act. So a really important feature. And of course, again, a lot of viewers are probably already aware of this, but the shift now is that, before, so much AI tool technology was being used, a lot of that information is being collected directly, either through contact or through filling out forms. But now, in fact, a lot of the time you might have an AI tool collecting that information for you, or you might even be putting an input into an AI tool, which is then giving you a response, which is personal information about somebody. So you've had a bit of a shift. And so that's why it's really important to remember that principle and think about that when you're looking at how your AI tool works. And then I suppose looking at that consent point, we have here an Unsolicited Electronic Messages Act, so a piece of legislation that effectively looks at electronic messaging and requiring a positive consent to receive electronic commercial messages. So not sure how similar that is to your position in Australia, but again, very similar to what Jacob's talking about when you're looking at consent, really looking at that clear consent that people understand what they're consenting to.
Yeah, excellent. I know, Lee, from a platform point of view, would you perhaps be able to talk to us a little bit about how you see organizations might manage or even enforce it, so that, of course, they're not having a big impact on the time that it takes for agents to do their work, or really impacting the customer experience? Yeah, how do you see it?
Well, we're facing the era where we have smart systems in place, AI, as mentioned by Julika. But when you are using these systems effectively and following all the protocols, you could embed consent prompts, dynamic scripts, and rule-based workflows that adapt in real time. and that's what will keep the agents busy, focus on the customer, and it doesn't take a lot of time for that consent to happen. But by integrating these key features seamlessly into the interface, AJ can stay focused on the conversation. So there's no bother to be able to let them focus on the system. We're actually creating this transparency with the system to collect what is necessary and formulate that into the display of the agents so that we're collecting and the agents are going through and collecting it without even spending much time on collecting that information. And this approach, it delivers fast, consistent, and provable consent management.
Okay, and so when we also just think about it from a pre-AI and now post-AI environment that we're in today, have things really changed? Because pre-AI, everything was recorded, like calls recorded, emails recorded, SMSs recorded, and can be retrieved. But with AI tools now available, has that really changed? Or are we worrying for nothing? Have the AI tools actually brought in generally, in general I'm talking about here, all the same recording that we have seen in the past? Can we expect that?
I would say it's more advanced. The requirement is the same. The requirement doesn't change in terms of recording all of that conversation. That is still the same, but it's now more advanced in where that you could now apply keywords when you're searching for some sort of breach within your system. So the tracking now, it's more allows the users to be more flexible in a way to retrieve and making certain, like an earlier conversation, making sure that you are not at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess there's one thing that does come to mind as well, though, is that pre-AI, there were sort of known range of vendor platforms out there. But of course, today there's now a multitude of new AI tools that are coming into the environment, aren't there? And added in or bolted on around the edge, peripheral type tools. So I guess with just a little reminder that we have to actually be very, very careful as so many new tools are actually entering into the ecosystem or the environment that we live in. Yeah. Okay. Hey, well, that's been a fascinating topic, but let's move on now to actually look at in a real time or the aspect that many of our guests will actually know well. And just a reminder to our guests, if you do have questions, don't hesitate to send through those on the Q&A. I just sort of move now to real-time monitoring because in an operational sense, relying on things such as automated rule enforcement and automation in general. In the past, the quality assurance that was undertaken, I think as a little as Lee said at the beginning, sometimes was days or even much longer after the actual interaction happened before someone actually reviewed and evaluated or scored an interaction. Whereas nowadays we're seeing so many more real-time or automated scoring and evaluation systems. So let's actually go to have a look at how real-time systems are actually going to change from a compliance point of view as we become so much more visible with what's available to us. The modern compliance demand has actually increased as well. So to kick that off, I want to ask Lee if he can tell us a bit about the automated rule management. Is it something that he'd expect business leaders, contact center managers to actually manage, or do we still actually really need to be looking to IT to drive those system improvements? Where should this actually be sitting, do you think?
I think with AI-powered compliance tools, non-technical leaders can define and deploy rules with a no-code interface, and IT will then just enable. But the business leads. The business define the rules. IT is there to enable those rules. So with what we have put into place, IT still plays an enabling role. ensuring integrations, data flows, and infrastructure security of all of those things. But the actual rule logic, thresholds, and enforcement parameters are now owned by the business. So this dramatically increases the speed to enforcement, reduces the misinterpretation between teams, and empowers the business leaders to stay agile as regulations evolve. So in short, IT enables it, and we still need the IT to support it, but the business team leads it. And in today's fast-moving regulatory environment, that's the only model that scales. And John, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of tools that are available to business people, and that require, no coding, and the business leaders can really take control of that compliance. The business people are the ones who know what's going on in the forefront, and so it's important that they have,
Have those controls. Yeah.
a view into what's going on the compliance side.
Yeah, thanks. And of course, the IT team have got so many other things that they're responsible for, not just contact center, that as you say, John, the business team are very focused on what's happening in that frontline and contact center environment overall. So I think, yeah, on balance from what you're saying, it maybe would fall much more to those who are focused on that area. I do want to open up for a moment back to the whole panel, just around it culturally. So many organizations are so keen to ensure that they are managing the cultural aspect of their overall contact center environment and how the employee experiences. Does anyone see any great impact in cultural implications from the increased real-time monitoring and AI tools that are available today?
For myself, I actually think that culturally, staff can actually begin to trust their managers a little bit more than they did in the past. Before, we had to have these really defined rules. We had things like word searches. We had things like if you meet this exact category or you don't. Whereas now, with things like AI tools, we can really look at the context of the whole conversation and how the agent and the consumer were acting to work out whether or not there was a compliance issue, a breach, or something like that, rather than having to look at those limited things that caused a lot of false positives in the past.
That's a great point, Jacob. Excellent. Yes, of course, the tool's actually looking at it from both sides. Did anyone else have a comment on that? No. Okay. Well, it's fine. Let's move on now from the real-time monitoring topic. We want to actually go on and look at audit readiness, because as many of our participants today who've joined will have actually experienced an audit or are managing the audit from their business operations point of view, to look at being ready for an audit and having your compliance reporting ready. This is the critical aspect now that we see regulators and organizations are increasingly expecting not just proof that your compliance measures are working, but that you are immediately able to provide that evidence, that it is very visible, very easily accessible for an auditor to actually retrieve. And as we were saying about real time, it's right up to date and completely available. Just recently, I was talking to a manager who was saying that in their experience of auditing, they're not just wanting to know, say, who has actually had access to the data, but who also has actually been attempting to log in and view it. So auditors becoming increasingly broad in their view of what they're looking for. So to get us started on this, let's come back to Jacob again. Would you be able to tell us a bit about what you understand regulators are actually primarily wanting to see in terms of reporting and audit trails in today's environment?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think you've already hit the nail on the head really well with, they really need to be retrievable, they need to be digestible, and they need to be also able to be produced without mixing of information. If somebody's looking for an audit trail on a specific matter, on a specific file, it needs to be able to be produced outside of the full reporting suite. I also think that I see a lot of audit trails that couldn't actually be called audit trails because they're missing things. There's people who, for some reason, are above the need to be logged in an audit log. There are ways to manipulate that audit log or ways to change it afterwards. All these things are really going to discount that audit log as even being used by the regulator. And I think if you're not starting with a really solid foundation around your audit logging, it's not going to work when the regulator comes knocking.
And I agree. I
Thanks.
think who, when, and how really comes into play with that. Like verifiable logs that show who, when, and how consent was obtained or action taken. So timestamps. So those are all it must be searchable, it must be immutable. So yeah, definitely right.
It doesn't matter if you don't think it's important, it matters whether or not it happened.
Exactly.
Whether or not it happened. Okay. Yeah, so we're not actually expecting, say, the business leader to place the importance on that. It'll be up to the auditor to decide, yeah, whether it's important or not. But that is a great point now to ask Julika from a legal perspective. How do you see that? If you were brought in between, the business leader and the auditor there, um, how would you view that?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think what both Lee and Jacob have talked about is exactly right. And I think from a legal perspective, the more you can show as well that at the outset you have the proper procedures in place, that you don't have gaps, right? The tools you were using, you reviewed the compliance of those tools and you're working in accordance with that. And then not only that, but you also need to make sure internally in your organization, even if the tool's got the capability, that in fact everyone's working in line as well. So you've got an internal policy in relation to who has to log what, how things are done, as well as an external privacy policy, and keeping those up to date, because this is a changing area. So it's something that needs to be looked at on a continuous basis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we come back to the topic we talked about at the very beginning, the consent tracking, are you able to talk, Julika, about how maybe consent tracking has changed, or like the current status as to maybe where it came from and where it's at today at all?
Yeah, sure. And I think maybe to a certain extent, consent tracking today is probably easier than what it might have been in the past, because now you've got the tools to be able to clearly show, hopefully that you've given someone the required information in an easy, understandable way, and they've done some sort of positive act to consent to that. So, while I'm sure a long time ago, we might be relying on consent over a phone call or a tick box, in a handwritten type form, now you've got the systems in place, which actually is probably easier to keep in your systems and be able to show, look at the outset of the relationship, here is the consent, and you've got that for every customer or client that you need.
Great, yes, and importantly to have that forever and a day. So thank you. And all panelists, let's just move on to the last topic I think we can address with the panel today. We're going to look at payments, or the important topic of PCI DSS. So for those who are actually collecting payments or have any involvement in payment management, things like credit card payments, for instance, coming in through your contact center, this is a very important aspect of compliance, but do realize that some people don't actually manage payments in the center. So if PCI DSS is important for you, let's actually just have a look at how that is now actually changing in the AI environment that we live in today, and the key aspects for you around that. So to start with, I'd like to just check with John, for centres that are still taking payments over the phone, what's the simplest way to reduce PCI exposure without a full systems overhaul and complete replacement?
Yeah, I mean, you want to make sure that payment information isn't being stored anywhere. And some of the easiest ways to do that are some of the new tools that have come out. So there's now voice analytics, which is, powered by AI, and you can use those tools to automatically redact payment information from the recording. So we're recording all our calls, but that payment information, it's important that that information is not recorded and stored in a place where somebody can go back and listen to it. So the AI tools will actually now go through the recording, and before that payment information even gets recorded to a file, that the artificial intelligence will recognize that it's, a bank account, a social security number, a credit card number, and it will remove that from the recording. So that's an important tool, and there's also tools like agent assisted payments, where the agent can actually send the consumer a text message, and that text message will include a link to a payment form, and the consumer can open up that payment form and enter their payment information right there, and the agent never even interacts with the payment information. The agent can see that the consumer is filling out that payment, and they can see when the payment has been completed. So it can all happen real time while the agent is on the phone with the consumer, but the agent never actually interacts with that payment information. So those are just a couple of tools that can really make it easy for firms to, not record any of that payment data.
Yeah. Well, thanks, John. That's great insight there, and I want to just broaden this topic a wee bit and think about some of the broader issues to do with payment collection from many different standpoints in the community. If we think about the ethics of collecting payments and managing the compliance aspect, we know that there's a lot of vulnerable people in the community. There's also a lot of people with specific ability or disability needs. Jacob, do you have a comment for us about how we should be managing these aspects of it in our compliance processes?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the important things to remember here is that PCI compliance is a rule book about about compliance with payment information. A lot of the time it can be conflated as though it is some other type of compliance. Just because one is PCI compliant doesn't mean that they're meeting all their other compliance objectives as well. We also need to have a look at the ethics of things. As John says, there's multiple ways that one can approach a problem. Do I want to have the payment information actually redacted from that call recording, or do I want to actually remove the ability from my agent to even interact with that vulnerable customer's card? I know which one I'm going to be going for. It's very important that we take a step back and don't just look at compliance, but look at it in the scheme of what it is that we're trying to achieve and the customer we're trying to assist.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Well, look, we're coming towards the end of the panel now, but I want to go back to open it to the panel overall and ask each of you, could you leave us with, one thought from today for any of the audience there today? If they're taking something away around compliance, is there a really key point for you? Why don't we start with Lee? Could you tell us what were the key point you'd see them taking away?
I would make sure that my processes, my systems are completely secure. And it's a huge protection, and it will prevent you from paying high fees. And I would make sure that you have a solid system in place. And the biggest compliance impact will be the real-time contextual monitoring, and that would allow you to evaluate the information obtained, how it is used, and prepare that to ensure that if you are at risk, that you have the ability to audit that and provide that information to the regulators.
Thanks, Lee. Excellent point. Why don't we hand over to Julika and ask, have you got a final point to for people to take away?
Yeah, sure. And I think, look, from a legal perspective, it's really important to understand the terms and conditions that sit behind the tools that you are using. Often seen a little bit as a boring part, right? But when you're looking at engaging all these, new tools, which is so great for productivity, taking the time at the outset is having a look at those terms and conditions that sit behind it and making sure that, in fact, those, perhaps marketing materials are reflected in actual contractual requirements to you, especially around the security and what's happening with data.
Great. And I guess that would include, say, data storage aspects, like asking those questions, like where is that data actually going to be? Who controls the movement of data? Who can access that data? Thanks, Jalika. Excellent point. I'm going to come back to Jacob. Have you got a last point for us there, Jacob?
I would continue on with what Jalika was saying and yourself there in knowing where my data is, how it's being used and how it's being interacted with, and start data minimization now where you can. Community sentiment on privacy and data collection is clearly changing. If it was me, I would rather be ahead of the curve and start data minimization now while I can.
Great, thank you. Excellent point. And last but not least, John, do you want to give us your takeaway point?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of live and breathe with the technology tools. So I would just make the point that, yeah, be aware of the technological tools that are available to you to help you, get those compliance needs met. They can't replace the need to be aware and familiar with all the compliance requirements. But as you look at these compliance requirements and they seem overwhelming, these technological tools can really help you meet those compliance needs.
Great, thanks, John. Excellent last point. So from here, we now that is the panel discussion for today. We're going to give the floor back to John and Lee from TCN. They're going to show us an actual practical aspect now. We're going to look at a demonstration. The rest of us will still be around, still looking forward to those questions because we come back to Q&A at the end of the session. But over to you, Lee and John.
Thank you. Well, based on some of the challenges we've heard and seen from customers and regulators like ACMA and the NC Privacy Commissioner, let's see how TCN, natural language compliance, actually automates these requirements in practice. Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just going to show some of the compliance tools that are available that TCN has. TCN has a natural language compliance platform, and this really enables you to kind of build rules based on natural language. So the idea of natural language compliance is that they're easy to write, they're easy to construct, and they're easy to understand. So I don't have to hire a programmer to come in and create these rules for me. And I also don't need my compliance officer or business manager who is managing that compliance doesn't have to get a degree in TCN widgets in order to understand what's going on with these compliance rules. So these are going to be written in natural language. So I've got a number of rule sets here. I'm going to open this one up that I've created, and we'll kind of just walk through some of the different things that you can do with it. You can see this is written in natural English language. So this is just saying deny outbound calls in. And when I create one of these rules, I'll kind of show you how this comes together. As I start to type, it's going to give me autocomplete suggestions and a drop-down menu of all the things I can do. So I can say, deny outbound calls or scrub outbound calls, and I can kind of construct my rule in a way that's easily understandable. So again, a compliance officer can come in here and easily look at these rules and understand what the rule is doing for their compliance audit. So to go through a little bit of what these rules can do, I'll just go through some of these. So your first rule here, this is basically you're saying like, I have a do not call list and I want to prevent any calls from going out on the platform. So this rule set will be applied to any calls that are made on the platform, and it will check every call that goes out against these rules as well. This next one says deny outbound calls in Australia before 7:30 a.m. and after 9 p.m. on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So I'm able to create a custom allowable time for my calls to go out. And again, every call is going to be checked against this rule, and anything outside of this is going to be disallowed. And I can narrow it down, as you can see, to country or region even. And I can also narrow it down, to the day of the week. So whether it's a weekday or Saturday, and then you can see also I've just denied all calls on Sunday. So I can create that custom allowable time period during the day. I can also create some frequency rules. So how often am I going to be allowed to call this a certain number? So I have a rule here that says deny outbound calls more than 3 times in 7 days. So the system is going to look over the past 7 days and look at all the calls and determine if this number that I'm calling, how many times has it been called? If it's more than 3, then it's going to disallow that call. So you can see here, I'm just saying like deny those calls. If I'm not, this is going to check by phone number how many times that's called, but I can also use a data field from my list. So for example, I have account number here. So this is the same rule, but it's checking by account number. So maybe I have 3 different phone numbers that all have the same account number, but I still want to limit the number of times I can call that in 7 days. So I can say deny outbound calls more than 3 times in 7 days using account number. And it's going to check all calls for all phone numbers, again, that are using the same account number. And then, yeah, this next one, you can see 10 times in 30 days, we can go back as to longer periods. So I might have, how many times do I want to call it in one day? How many times in a week? And how many times in a month? And I can restrict all of those. I can also, specify the region for those rules as well. So yeah,
And
so that's a good.
also, just in addition to that as well, John, although it's indicating outbound calls, but it is very robust where you could also look into your SMS campaigns and other areas of your communication with your customers that you could prevent and apply rules to those as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Great point. So you can also restrict SMS, you can restrict outbound. You can check all those mediums as well to see, how many attempts you've done across any medium. So yeah, so here I have some New Zealand rules that are specific to New Zealand. You can see here, I've got a rule here where I'm saying 1 time in 1 day and I'm looking at the call result. So this is looking to see, okay, was this call connected to a live person and connected to an agent where the agent and the consumer were talking to each other? And it's looking at that to determine the frequency of the call. So maybe if I get a no answer, I do want to call it again that day, but if it's a live person, I don't want to. So that's a system result. And then you can also base that on an agent response. So based on, if an agent talked to that person, what did the agent say happened with that call? So RPC here would be an agent disposition. So that would be like a right party connect, meaning the agent talked to the right party. So based on that, that's when I'm going to say, okay, I want to limit that if my agent talks to a right party, I don't want to call that again in the same day. And these rules can go all the way down to 1 hour, essentially. So anywhere from 30 days to an hour, I can restrict the frequency of those calls. And then here I also have another rule where I've done, a specific holiday. So I'm restricting calls in New Zealand on this particular holiday. And as you fill in this holiday, it'll give you a list of, 300 or 400 holidays that are available. Any holiday that you can think of is going to be available in there, and you can restrict by those holidays. And then you have your scrub list. So I wanted to talk briefly about scrub lists. So scrub lists allow you to send in phone numbers or account numbers or other identifying details, and you can upload those by API, and that will allow you to real-time add phone numbers to your list and scrub against that list to make sure that nothing on that list gets called. So a scrub list is slightly different from a do not call list in that a scrub list is something that you want to expire. So you don't want to call this number or this account for the next day or the next 2 weeks. Maybe they called in, made a payment. It's just a backstop. Normally, you're not going to be sending those accounts to be called, right? But if by accident or for whatever reason you do, or if it's already in your list for today, but they call in and make a payment, you can send that account number or that phone number over to your scrub list, and real time that will get updated, so that you don't call someone that you are not intending to. So that's, you can see that this is, very simple to use, very simple to understand, and it's really built to be accessible by those floor managers, business leaders. It does not have to be somebody who has to learn how to program in order to create these rules. So yeah, that's TCN's natural language compliance.
Thanks, John. Pass on to you, Giles. I think we have just a few minutes left for questions from our audience, from our participants. Do you want to pass that over to you, Giles?
Yes, thank you very much. And I do actually have a question for John, because I was really following with interest the demonstration there. And just wanted to ask very briefly, for our guests who are watching your demonstration, if their system didn't have the ease of access to this rule set that you've shown, which is really good and very comprehensive, what sort of questions should they be asking of, say, the IT team, of where they should expect to find this sort of information? Because yours is so beautifully captured all in one place. It may not be in one place for them. How would you start addressing that with the IT team?
Yeah, so when you have these types of requirements, like you guys, like everybody probably has a requirement of how many times you can call somebody in a 7-day period or in a 30-day period. So yeah, so ask your IT team, where are we keeping track of that information? How many times we're calling somebody? How are we making sure that we're not calling somebody at 7 a.m.? Maybe we're calling from a different time zone, and it's 8 a.m. for the agents, but maybe it's 7 a.m. for the person that you're calling. So what are the controls that you have in place to make sure that those things don't happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. And of course, minefield across Australia, where we've got multiple different time zones and many different rules according to the various states.
Yep.
So thanks so much for the demonstration. It was excellent. And we're going to move to the Q&A. So to start now with some questions that we have, I want to just ask Lee if he could help us with the first one that's come in. Because many organizations say that they have compliance under control, to use our headline for this webinar. But what's one red flag that would tell you, if you were invited into their organization, that they actually don't have their compliance under control? Where do you look first under the hood?
I Well, when you're first walking in, you're definitely not going to say if you are compliant, but having conversation with agents on the phone, I think that's where I would start, is understanding what are they collecting and what are some of the requirements that they are held to in their work. And I would definitely start with that. I would definitely identify that there might be some risks involved based on the conversation that you hear when I walk into their call center. There might be a conversation about things that you're not supposed to say or do. So that's a red flag immediately once you start hearing that conversation. But if you walk into a center that are fully compliant, you'll never hear any things that they're not supposed to say. So that's the immediate thing for me when I walk into a call center, and then of course after that I have to look under the hood to see what their systems are like, what to set up. So, but in order for you to recognize that, you have to go into and look. But we are very open to come in and see if you are compliant or not.
Yes, yeah, great. Lee, thank you for that. And now we have a second question that's come in, actually a legal one. So the question that we've had is, how can contact centers better communicate to the customers that their data is being protected without overwhelming them with all the legal language? I mean, it sounds like someone in a banking environment here. I can imagine this would be exactly the issue, without actually overwhelming the customers with all the legal language. Jalika, would you like to try that one?
Yeah, sure. And look, it's probably going to depend, obviously, in what country you're in. From a New Zealand perspective, if you're in a position to be able to say that we are fully compliant with, New Zealand laws and regulations, including the Privacy Act, that's a real simple way. I mean, a lot of people here do have at least a base knowledge that the Privacy Act exists, and that gives them some assurance that, in fact, you are doing what you need to with their data.
Thank you. Thanks, Jalika. And I think we've got time for our last question today. And I want to ask Jacob on this one around really just looking to the future. And this is really your crystal ball, Jacob. So there's no right answer on this one. But where do you think AI will have the biggest impact on compliance in the next few years?
Yeah, geez, I'll get out my crystal ball. Look, I think the biggest thing for me, as I think I've touched on before, is this ability to look at the context of compliance in the business rather than just setting strict rules. I think John, in his demonstration, really touched on this as well, this idea of being able to say, here's the language that we're using to communicate to our staff, and turning those rules directly into compliance rules rather than having to have an extra step in between, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. No, very practical, very pragmatic approach, as you've pointed out rightly. So, yeah, thanks for that, and also to John for that in the demonstration. Well, that actually brings us to the end of our webinar today. And so I'd like to firstly thank all of our guests who've joined us. Really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to come and join the webinar. Please remember to send through questions afterwards. We're very happy to have those addressed by any of our panelists from here on, and you may not even think of them right away. Happy to have those coming in at a later stage. To my fellow panelists and webinar speakers, Jalika, Jacob, John, Lee, and I don't want to forget who has organised and managed this, but is not visible, but Maylene Flowers, who's done a fantastic job. Thank you to all of you for today. Really appreciate your experience, your knowledge, and your willingness to share it. Thanks for your time, and looking forward to continuing to talk to you about this great topic as we go forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Charles.
That's the end of
Thanks,
our
Charles.
webinar today.